The Forbidden Rescue. The air inside the mining colony was thick with smoke and the faint hum of machinery. Jack Carter adjusted the hood of his worn-out jacket, blending into the crowd of workers moving between the loading docks. His instincts screamed at him to turn back, but his curiosity was stronger. The encrypted message he intercepted spoke of something valuable, a high-priority asset being held in the underground facility. Jack didn't trust the galactic corporations that ran this place. They were always hiding secrets, and secrets meant money. As an ex-soldier turned smuggler, Jack knew the risk, but he also knew this could be his ticket out of his miserable life. He slipped past the guards, his movements practiced and silent. The deeper he went, the louder his heartbeat grew. The metallic corridors were dimly lit, and the occasional flicker of a faulty light only added to the tension. When he finally reached the restricted area, a massive steel door loomed before him. He scanned the keypad and pulled out a stolen data chip. "Come on, work," he muttered under his breath. The door clicked, and Jack's lips curled into a triumphant smirk. Inside, the room was eerily quiet. Rows of glass containment pods lined the walls, each one glowing faintly. Jack's eyes narrowed as he approached the nearest pod. Inside, strange alien creatures floated in stasis. Some looked like predators. Others seemed harmless. But one pod at the end of the room was different. Jack's breath caught in his throat as he saw her. A woman, unlike any he'd ever seen, stood inside. Her silver eyes glowed softly, and her skin shimmered faintly under the pale light. Her hair floated around her like a halo, and her regal posture made it clear she wasn't just another prisoner. "What the hell are they keeping here?" Jack whispered to himself. As he moved closer, the woman's eyes snapped open, locking onto his. Jack froze. For a moment, he thought she was about to scream, but instead, her expression softened. She placed her hand on the glass, her gaze pleading. Jack hesitated. "You're awake?" he asked, his voice low. She didn't respond, but her eyes darted toward a control panel on the side of her pod. Jack's instincts screamed at him to leave, but something about her made him pause. This wasn't just curiosity anymore. It felt wrong, keeping someone like her locked up in this place. "Damn it," he muttered, pulling out his tools. As he worked to override the pod's controls, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Red lights flashed, and a robotic voice echoed through the corridors. "Unauthorized access detected. Security en route." "Of course," Jack growled. "Couldn't be easy, could it?" The pod hissed open, and the woman stumbled forward, catching herself against Jack. Up close, he realized how tall she was, almost his height. She looked at him, her lips trembling as she tried to speak. "Thank you," she said, her voice melodic yet strained. "Save it for later," Jack said, pulling her along. "We're about to have company." As they ran, the sound of heavy boots echoed behind them. Jack pulled out his blaster and fired a few shots, forcing the guards to take cover. The woman, still weak, leaned heavily on him, but her determination to keep moving impressed him. "What's your name?" Jack asked, as they ducked into a maintenance tunnel. "Lyara," she whispered. "Okay, Lyara," he said, his voice firm. "You better be worth the trouble I'm in." The tunnel led them to the outskirts of the colony, but a squad of armed guards was already waiting for them. Jack cursed under his breath, his blaster feeling too small against their firepower. "Stay behind me," he told Lyara. But before he could fire, Lyara stepped forward. She raised her hand, and a wave of energy pulsed from her body, sending the guards flying. Jack stared in shock as Lyara collapsed into his arms. What was that?" he asked, his voice filled with awe and confusion. Lyara's breathing was ragged, but she managed a faint smile. "I'll explain. Later." Jack shook his head, pulling her to her feet again. "You better. Let's get out of here first." The two of them disappeared into the wilderness surrounding the colony, leaving chaos in their wake. Jack didn't know what he had just gotten himself into, but one thing was clear. This was no ordinary rescue. And Lyara was no ordinary woman. The princess revealed. The tiny hideout Jack had found was barely more than a cave carved into the rocky westlands of the mining planet. The glow of a single portable lamp flickered, casting long shadows on the rough walls. Lyara sat across from him, wrapped in a thermal blanket Jack had scavenged from his pack. Her silver eyes reflected the dim light, making it impossible for Jack to look away for too long. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Okay, I just risked my neck to pull you out of that hellhole. I deserve some answers. Who are you? And what's so special about you that they had you locked up in a high-security lab?" For a long moment, Lyara said nothing. Her gaze wandered to the lamp, her expression distant. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, but carried an authority that caught Jack off guard. "My name is Princess Lyara, she said, her words slow and deliberate. "I am the last heir to the Andrelian Empire." Jack blinked, then let out a short laugh. "A princess? Seriously? That's your story?" Lyara's eyes narrowed. "Do I look like someone who jokes, human?" Jack's smirk faded as the weight of her words sank in. He'd heard of the Andrelian Empire, though most humans only knew fragments of the stories. A vast alien civilization, powerful and mysterious. It had ruled over entire star systems before a civil war tore it apart. But that was years ago, and most assumed the empire had crumbled for good. "All right, let's say I believe you," Jack said, rubbing the back of his neck. "What's a princess doing locked up in a human lab? Shouldn't you have an army protecting you or something?" Lyara's jaw tightened, and for the first time, Jack saw a flicker of vulnerability in her otherwise regal demeanor. "I was betrayed," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "by my own people. They handed me over to the humans in exchange for weapons and resources. They thought I was a threat to their claim to power." Jack stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. "So, you're telling me your people sold you out to us?" "Yes," she said, her tone sharp. "And your kind didn't waste time experimenting on me like some kind of lab rat." The words hit Jack harder than he expected. He wasn't naive about humanity's flaws. He'd seen firsthand how the corporations treated anything alien as a resource to exploit. But hearing it from Lyara made it feel personal. "I didn't exactly sign up for that part," Jack said defensively. Lyara tilted her head, studying him. "Then why did you save me?" Jack hesitated. He'd asked himself the same question since the moment he opened her pod. He could have turned away, avoided the trouble, and gone on with his life. But something about her presence, her strength, had compelled him to act. "Honestly, I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe I just don't like seeing people locked up against their will, even if they're not people like me." Lyara's expression softened, and for the first time, Jack thought he saw gratitude in her eyes. Before either of them could say more, a faint noise echoed from outside the cave. Jack froze, holding up a hand to silence Lyara. The sound of boots crunching on gravel reached his ears, and his pulse quickened. "They found us," he muttered, grabbing his blaster. Lyara stood, her movements steady despite her earlier weakness. "You won't survive this on your own," she said. "I don't plan to," Jack replied. "Stay here. I'll handle it." But Lyara stepped forward, her silver eyes blazing. "No, I won't hide while you fight my battles, human." Jack was about to argue when the first shot rang out, striking the rock above his head. He cursed under his breath, firing back blindly toward the entrance. To his astonishment, Lyara stepped past him, raising her hand. A ripple of energy burst from her palm, striking their attackers with precise force. The guards were thrown back, as if hit by an invisible wave. Jack lowered his blaster, staring at her in disbelief. What the hell was that? "The power of the heart," Lyara said, her voice steady. "It's complicated, and it's why they want me so badly." Jack didn't have time to ask what she meant. More guards were coming, and their options were running out. "We need to move," he said, grabbing her arm. Lyara didn't resist. As they slipped into the night, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just been pulled into something far bigger than he could have imagined. And for the first time in years, he wasn't sure if he could handle it. The human connection. The starship cockpit hummed with the low thrum of the engines, a soothing sound against the chaos Jack and Lyara had just escaped. Outside the viewport, stars stretched endlessly, their cold beauty a stark contrast to the heated silence inside. Jack sat in the pilot's chair, his fingers drumming against the controls. Lyara stood at the edge of the cockpit, staring out at the void. She hadn't spoken much since their narrow escape, but her presence was impossible to ignore. Even in silence, she carried herself with an air of authority, a reminder that she wasn't just a passenger. She was royalty. "All right, Princess," Jack said, breaking the silence. "I think it's time you tell me what this heart thing is. That little trick back there wasn't exactly normal." Lyara turned slowly, her silver eyes locking onto his. She folded her arms, her expression calm but guarded. "The heart of Andrelia is not a thing. It is an ancient artifact, a gift from the first Andrelian rulers. It is said to hold the essence of our people, their knowledge, and their strength. It is why my enemies fear me. With the heart, I could reclaim my throne and unite my people." Jack leaned back in his chair, raising an eyebrow. "Reclaim your throne? So, what, you're planning to march back in there and play queen while everyone bows down to you?" Lyara's lips tightened. "It's not that simple. My people are divided. The heart could inspire them to rally behind me, but it could also be used to destroy what's left of the empire if it falls into the wrong hands." Jack let out a low whistle. "So you're carrying a weapon that can either save your people or end them. No pressure." Lyara's gaze didn't waver. "I didn't ask for your sarcasm. Human." "Jack," he corrected, leaning forward. "The name's Jack, and sarcasm's the only thing keeping me sane right now." For a moment, Lyara's serious expression softened, almost imperceptibly. "Very well, Jack. If it helps, use your sarcasm. But I need you to understand something. My survival isn't just about me. If the heart is taken, the balance of power in the galaxy could shift. Do you understand the stakes now?" Jack rubbed the back of his neck, exhaling sharply. "Yeah, I get it. Galaxy-ending stakes. Story of my life." The corner of Lyara's mouth twitched, a faint hint of amusement. It caught Jack off guard. Was the princess actually capable of smiling? The brief moment of levity faded as the ship's warning systems blared. Jack's fingers flew over the controls, bringing up the sensors. His stomach sank when he saw the blip on the screen. "Looks like we got company," he said grimly. Lyara moved to his side, her calm demeanor betraying only a flicker of concern. "Bounty hunters." "Or worse," Jack replied. "Strap in. This might get rough." The pursuing ship was fast, its weapon systems lighting up the darkness with a barrage of laser fire. Jack threw the starship into a sharp dive, narrowly avoiding the blasts. Lyara gripped the edge of the console, her silver eyes scanning the tactical readout. "They're trying to disable us," she said. "No kidding," Jack muttered, pulling the ship into a barrel roll. "They want you alive, remember? Me, not so much." "Then let me help," Lyara said, her voice steady. Jack glanced at her. "Help how? You gonna wave your magic heart at them?" Lyara didn't answer. Instead, she closed her eyes, placing her hand on the console. Jack felt the ship shudder beneath him, and for a moment, he thought something had gone wrong. Then he saw the enemy ship on the sensors. Its systems were glitching, its weapons misfiring. What did you just do?" Jack asked, his voice tinged with awe. Lyara opened her eyes, her expression serene. "I disrupted their systems. It won't last long. You need to lose them." Jack didn't need to be told twice. He pushed the engines to their limit, weaving through a dense asteroid field. The enemy ship struggled to follow, its damaged systems unable to match Jack's maneuvers. When the enemy finally veered off, Jack let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He turned to Lyara, his expression a mix of frustration and admiration. "Okay, you're officially the weirdest passenger I've ever had," he said. Lyara raised an eyebrow. "Weird? Is that how humans show gratitude?" Jack chuckled despite himself. "Gratitude, sure. But I've got questions, Princess. A lot of them." Lyara sat down across from him, her expression softening. Then asked, "Jack, you've earned that much." For the first time since their chaotic meeting, Jack felt a flicker of trust between them. He didn't know where this journey would lead, but one thing was clear. He was in it now, for better or worse. The chase through the stars. The cockpit was silent except for the rhythmic hum of the engines, a deceptive calm after the chaos they had narrowly escaped. Jack adjusted the flight controls, his jaw tight as he glanced at the sensors. The blip was still there. No matter how fast or clever he thought he was, their pursuers weren't giving up. "They're not backing off," he muttered, his grip tightening on the controls. Lyara sat beside him, her posture calm but her glowing silver eyes fixed on the screen. "They won't stop until they have me, Jack. The bounty on my capture is worth more than this ship and everything on it." "Well, that's comforting," Jack said, his voice laced with sarcasm. "Remind me why I didn't just leave you in that lab." Lyara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked out at the swirling starlight beyond the viewport, her expression unreadable. "Because you couldn't," she said quietly. Jack opened his mouth to argue but stopped. She wasn't wrong. Something about her had compelled him to act, though he wasn't entirely sure why. A sharp beeping from the console snapped him back to the present. He cursed under his breath as the proximity alert lit up. "They're gaining on us. We need to shake them now." Lyara leaned forward, studying the redouts. "There's an asteroid belt nearby. It's dense enough to hide us." Jack groaned. "Asteroids. Great, just what I needed. Dodging rocks while being shot at." "You have a better idea?" Lyara asked, her tone sharp. "Not really," Jack admitted, pulling the ship into a sharp turn. "Hold on, Princess. This is going to get bumpy." The starfield blurred as the ship veered toward the asteroid belt, the vast expanse of tumbling rocks growing larger with each passing second. Jack tightened his grip on the controls, his eyes scanning for a safe path through the chaos. Behind them, the pursuing ship was closing in, its weapons lighting up the darkness with deadly precision. Jack pushed the engines to their limit, weaving between the asteroids with a skill that surprised even himself. "They're still on us," Lyara said, her voice steady despite the tension. "I can see that," Jack snapped. "Unless you've got another one of your tricks, I'm running out of options here." Lyara's eyes narrowed as she placed a hand on the console. Jack felt a faint hum beneath his feet, different from the usual vibrations of the ship. Before he could ask what she was doing, a wave of energy pulsed outward, and the sensors flickered. The pursuing ship hesitated, its movements erratic as its systems struggled to compensate. "What the hell did you just do?" Jack asked, glancing at her. "Disrupted their guidance systems," Lyara said, her tone calm. "It won't last long, but it should buy us time." Jack let out a low whistle. "Remind me not to get on your bad side." Lyara didn't respond, her focus still on the viewport. Jack took the opportunity to dive deeper into the asteroid belt, using the dense field to their advantage. The enemy ship faltered, its damaged systems unable to keep up with the erratic movements of the asteroids. Finally, the blip on the sensors disappeared, and Jack exhaled in relief. "We're clear," he said, leaning back in his seat. "For now," Lyara replied, her gaze still fixed on the stars. Jack turned to her, his expression a mix of frustration and curiosity. "You keep pulling these tricks out of nowhere. That heart thing of yours, it's not just a weapon, is it?" Lyara hesitated, her fingers brushing against the edge of the console. "The heart of Andrelia it is, more than I can fully explain. It's connected to me, to my people, to our past. It's not just a tool, it's a part of who we are." Jack frowned. So you're telling me this ancient artifact is why half the galaxy wants you dead or in chains? Yes, Lyara said simply. Jack shook his head, running a hand through his hair. You Andrilians really know how to make things complicated. Lyara turned to him, a faint smile tugging at her lips. And you humans are so simple. Jack snorted. Fair point. For a moment, the tension between them eased, replaced by a fleeting sense of camaraderie. But Jack knew it wouldn't last. The galaxy didn't give second chances, and neither did their enemies. All right, Princess, he said, leaning forward to plot their next course. We got a head start, but we can't outrun them forever. What's the plan? Lyara's smile faded, replaced by a determined look. We find a safe place to regroup. There's someone I need to contact, an ally who can help us. But first, we need to stay alive long enough to reach them. Jack nodded, setting the ship on a new trajectory. As the stars shifted outside the viewport, he couldn't shake the feeling that this chase was just the beginning. Whatever Lyara was running from, it was bigger than either of them. And somehow, Jack had become a part of it. Trust and betrayal. The neutral moon of Carvos was a haven for drifters, smugglers, and anyone who didn't want to be found. Its surface was a maze of jagged cliffs and glowing mineral deposits, giving it an otherworldly, almost eerie beauty. Jack set the starship down in a secluded canyon, its engines hissing as they powered down. This place doesn't exactly scream safe, Jack muttered, glancing at the glowing rocks that pulsed faintly in the dim light. Lyara unstrapped herself from her seat, her silver eyes scanning the horizon through the viewport. Safe is relative, human. No one would look for us here. And that's what we need right now. Jack rolled his eyes but didn't argue. He knew better than to press her when she got that tone. Calm, regal, and completely dismissive of his doubts. They stepped out of the ship, the crisp air biting against Jack's skin. He adjusted his jacket, his eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of movement. This moon might have been neutral, but that didn't mean it was unoccupied. All right, Jack said, pulling a small beacon from his pack. I've got a contact here. Name's Vrex. He's a tech smuggler, specializes in stolen corporate data and black market mods. If anyone can help us, it's him. Lyara arched an eyebrow. And you trust this Vrex? Jack hesitated. Trust is a strong word, but he owes me a favor, and he's not the type to pass up a chance to cash in on something big. Lyara's expression darkened. If this is another one of your gambles, Jack. It's not a gamble, Jack interrupted. It's a calculated risk. Big difference. Lyara didn't reply, but her piercing gaze made Jack feel like he was being measured. With a sigh, he activated the beacon. They waited in tense silence, the faint hum of the beacon the only sound in the canyon. After what felt like an eternity, a sleek black skimmer appeared on the horizon, its headlights cutting through the haze. Jack's grip tightened on his blaster as the skimmer came to a stop a few meters away. The door hissed open, and a tall figure stepped out. Vrex was a Kelleran, his leathery blue skin and glowing orange eyes, giving him an otherworldly appearance. He grinned, showing a row of sharp teeth. Jack Carter, Vrex said, his voice a gravelly purr. Been a while. Thought you were dead. Almost, Jack replied, his tone wary. Got a job for you, Vrex. Something big. Vrex's glowing eyes shifted to Lyara, his grin widening. Oh, I see. You've brought me royalty. And here I thought you only dealt in scrap. Lyara stepped forward, her posture regal despite the tension. I am Princess Lyara, Tosorel of the Andrelian Empire, and if you can help us, you'll be well rewarded. Vrex let out a low chuckle. A princess and a promise of riches. You really know how to pick your company, Jack. Can you help us or not? Jack asked, his patience wearing thin. Vrex tilted his head, studying them both. Depends on what you need, and how much you're willing to pay. Jack handed over a data chip. This has access codes to a corporate vault. Enough to buy you a new life on any planet you want. Vrex's eyes lit up as he scanned the chip. Now that's what I like to see. All right, Carter, you've got a deal. Follow me. The group boarded Vrex's skimmer and sped off toward his hideout, a hidden bunker carved into the side of a cliff. Inside, the walls were lined with stolen tech, glowing consoles, and crates of contraband. As Vrex worked to modify their ship's transponder and scramble their trail, Jack leaned against the wall, watching him carefully. Something didn't feel right, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Are you sure we can trust him? Lyara asked quietly, standing beside him. No, Jack admitted, but we don't have a lot of options. Before Lyara could respond, the sound of heavy boots echoed through the bunker. Jack's hand flew to his blaster, but it was too late. A squad of armed soldiers stormed in, their weapons trained on them. What the Vrex? Jack shouted, turning to the smuggler. Vrex shrugged, his grin now predatory. Sorry, Carter. The bounty on her is worth more than your little vault codes. Lyara stepped forward, her silver eyes blazing with fury. You betrayed us. Nothing personal, Princess, Vrex said, backing away as the soldiers advanced. Just business. Jack fired at the soldiers, his shots forcing them to scatter, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Lyara raised her hand, and a pulse of energy erupted from her, sending the soldiers flying. Run, Jack shouted, grabbing her arm. They sprinted through the bunker, dodging blasts as they made their escape. The betrayal stung, but Jack didn't have time to dwell on it. As they reached the ship, Jack turned to Lyara. I told you, trust is a strong word. Lyara smirked, despite the chaos, and now I understand why. With the engines roaring to life, they blasted off into the night sky, leaving Carvos and its treacheries behind. But Jack couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The final stand. The abandoned Andrelian world of Solvaris was unlike anything Jack had ever seen. Massive ruins of alien architecture stretched across the barren plains, their sharp angles and glowing runes whispering of a once great civilization. A haunting stillness hung in the air, broken only by the distant howl of the wind. Jack stood atop a jagged cliff overlooking the ruins, his blaster strapped to his side. He didn't like their odds, but he'd stopped liking his odds the moment he'd freed Lyara from that lab. Behind him, Lyara approached, her silver eyes fixed on the ruins below. She held the heart of Andrelia in her hands, the artifact glowing faintly with an energy Jack couldn't begin to understand. It was no larger than a human heart, but it pulsed with a power that felt alive, almost sentient. This is where we make our stand, Lyara said, her voice steady. Jack turned to her, his brow furrowed. You sure about that? Because it looks like the kind of place where people go to die. Lyara's lips twitched in a faint smile. That's what they'll expect. But this place isn't just ruins. It's a fortress. My ancestors built it to defend against invaders long before your kind ever took to the stars. Jack raised an eyebrow. And you're sure it still works? Because if it doesn't, we're about to get vaporized by a lot of very angry people. Lyara stepped closer, holding the heart out in front of her. The heart is the key. If I can activate the defense systems, we'll have a chance. Jack sighed, shaking his head. You've got guts, Princess. I'll give you that. Before they could say more, a sharp beeping from Jack's wrist communicator cut through the air. He tapped the device, and a holographic display flickered to life, showing several ships descending through the atmosphere. They found us, Jack muttered. Lyara didn't flinch. Then we don't have much time. Follow me. She led him down the winding path into the ruins, her movements purposeful despite the looming danger. The ancient structures seemed to hum as they passed, responding to the presence of the heart. Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of awe, though it was tempered by the knowledge that they were running out of time. They reached the center of the ruins, a massive chamber filled with towering columns etched with glowing runes. Lyara stepped into the center, placing the heart on a pedestal. Stay back, she warned. Jack didn't need to be told twice. He retreated to the edge of the chamber, his blaster at the ready. Lyara closed her eyes, her hands hovering over the heart. A low vibration filled the air as the artifact began to glow brighter. The runes on the columns lit up in response, spreading outward like a web of light. The ground shook, and Jack struggled to keep his balance. "Is it supposed to do that?" he shouted over the noise. "Yes," Lyara replied, her voice calm despite the chaos. "But I need more time." The sound of approaching engines grew louder, and Jack turned to see the enemy ships descending toward the ruins. Soldiers poured out, their weapons gleaming under the alien sky. "Time's up," Jack muttered, raising his blaster. He fired at the advancing soldiers, his shots precise, but not enough to hold them back. He ducked behind a fallen column, returning fire as they closed in. "Lyara," he called out. Any day now would be great. The heart's glow intensified, and a sudden pulse of energy erupted from the pedestal, knocking several soldiers off their feet. Lyara's voice echoed through the chamber, speaking in a language Jack didn't understand. The runes on the walls began to shift and rearrange, forming intricate patterns that pulsed with light. Outside, the ruins came alive. Massive turrets rose from the ground, firing beams of energy at the invading ships. Shields formed around the chamber, deflecting incoming blasts. Jack couldn't help but grin as he watched the chaos unfold. Now that's more like it. But the enemy wasn't giving up. More soldiers advanced, and the remaining ships began targeting the ruins with heavier firepower. Jack continued to fight, his focus split between covering Lyara and staying alive. Suddenly, a soldier broke through the defenses, charging straight for Lyara. Jack's heart raced as he raised his blaster, but before he could fire, Lyara turned and raised her hand. A wave of energy blasted the soldier back, slamming him into a column. Lyara looked at Jack, her silver eyes blazing. "The defenses are active, but they won't hold forever. We need to finish this now." Jack nodded, stepping closer to her. "What do you need me to do?" She hesitated, then handed him a small glowing shard that had emerged from the heart. "Place this in the conduit at the far end of the chamber. It will complete the activation sequence." Jack grabbed the shard, dodging blaster fire as he sprinted toward the conduit. The air was thick with energy, and every step felt like a battle against an invisible force. He reached the conduit, slamming the shard into place. A deafening roar filled the chamber as the heart's power surged through the ruins. The enemy ships were obliterated in a single wave of energy, and the remaining soldiers fled in terror. As the dust settled, Jack turned to see Lyara standing tall, her expression a mix of exhaustion and triumph. "You did it," Jack said, a hint of disbelief in his voice. "We did it," Lyara corrected, her gaze softening. For the first time, Jack felt like they had a real chance, but deep down, he knew this was only the beginning of their fight. Love and defiance. The ruins of Solvaris were eerily quiet in the aftermath of the battle. The air shimmered faintly with residual energy from the heart of Andrelia, now nestled in Lyara's hands. The towering columns, once glowing with ancient power, were dim, their purpose fulfilled. The silence was broken only by the distant hum of wind sweeping across the barren plains. Jack sat on a broken slab of stone, his blaster still in hand, though his grip was loose. His chest heaved as he caught his breath, the adrenaline of the fight slowly fading. Across the chamber, Lyara stood silhouetted against the pale glow of the alien sky. She held the heart close, her expression unreadable. "You okay, Princess?" Jack called out, his voice rough. Lyara didn't answer immediately. She turned to face him, her silver eyes softer now, almost vulnerable. "I'm alive. That's more than I expected when this began." Jack chuckled dryly. "Yeah, well, you have a knack for dragging people into impossible situations." Lyara stepped closer, her movements slow but deliberate. She stopped a few feet away, her gaze locking onto his. "And yet you stayed." Jack shrugged, trying to downplay the weight of her words. Didn't have much choice, did I? You're not exactly the leave-behind type. A faint smile tugged at Lyara's lips, but it didn't last. Her expression grew serious, her grip tightening on the heart. The galaxy won't let this stand, Jack. What we did here, it's only the beginning. They'll come for me. For us. Jack leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Let them come. We've already done the impossible once. What's one more time? Lyara shook her head, her voice tinged with sadness. This isn't just about survival anymore. The heart's signal has spread. My people will know I'm alive, but so will my enemies. The Andrillian factions, the human corporations, they'll all see me as a threat. Jack stood, his tall frame casting a shadow over her. Then we show them you're more than a threat. You're a leader, someone worth fighting for. Lyara's eyes searched his, as if trying to decipher his intentions. And you? Why would you fight for me, Jack? This isn't your war. Jack hesitated, his usual smirk replaced by something softer, more genuine. Maybe it's not my war, but it's my fight now. You made it my fight the moment you trusted me. And besides, he paused, rubbing the back of his neck. I'm not about to let you do this alone. Lyara's expression shifted, her regal composure breaking for just a moment. You don't have to do this, Jack. You could walk away. Start over somewhere safe. Jack laughed, shaking his head. Safe? With a galaxy full of people trying to kill me? Yeah, no thanks. I'm sticking with you. The air between them seemed to grow heavier, charged with unspoken emotions. Lyara stepped closer, her voice soft. You're a strange man, Jack Carter. He grinned, his usual charm returning. Takes one to know one, Princess. Before she could respond, the heart pulsed, its glow intensifying. Lyara looked down at it, her expression turning grave. It's time. Jack frowned. Time for what? The heart's signal isn't just a beacon, Lyara explained. It's a declaration. It's telling the galaxy that the true heir to Andrillia has returned, and it's inviting them to choose a side. Jack's stomach tightened. You're really throwing down the gauntlet, huh? Lyara nodded, her voice steady. It's the only way to unite my people, but it means exposing myself to every enemy I have. Jack stepped closer, his tone firm. Then you won't face them alone. We'll do this together. Lyara looked up at him, her silver eyes shining with something that looked like hope. You really mean that, don't you? Jack smirked. What can I say? I've got a soft spot for impossible odds. For the first time, Lyara let herself smile. A real, genuine smile. She reached out, placing her hand over his. Then let's give them something to fear. Together, they turned toward the horizon, where the first Andrillian ships were descending from the sky, their shapes dark against the pale light. Jack's hand instinctively moved to his blaster, while Lyara stood tall, the heart glowing brighter in her grasp. The galaxy might have seen them as an impossible alliance, a rogue human and a fallen princess, but they were about to prove that even the most broken pieces could create something powerful. And for the first time in a long while, Jack felt something he hadn't dared to feel in years. Hope.